real quick. Showdown is something we're going to see those pretty much every night now. You have 3 separate Showdown slates for just tonight alone. There's a big one later tonight, St. Louis, Colorado, $5,000 to first, which was, if I'm not mistaken, that was the size of the full day slate yesterday. So like there could be some good Showdown slates. Now we've talked about Showdown a little bit before, but just to give people kind of the basics, you have to pick for both teams. You have to have at least one player from both teams. You have 6 roster slots with 1 captain. Your captain is worth 1.5 points. So if they score 30 points, you add half of that, which is 15, to give you 45 points total. Strategy, I think, is kind of the important thing here. And I just want to talk about one thing I want to talk about initially is full line goals, because we talk about stacking a lot here, because stacking is very, very important, because you stack your points up when you get those goals, right? You get those full line goals, you get that 20 points. It feels real good. The thing is that full line goals aren't things that are super common. Like I just looked from this year, from last year, just from a few lines that play together quite often. Fewer than half. Now, think of how much McDavid and Draisaitl play together this year, both at 5-on-5 and the power play combined. Fewer than half of McDavid's goals were assisted by Draisaitl this year. Over the last 2 years, 15 out of 55 goals, or around 33%. No, a little bit more than that. By McKinnon over the last 2 years were assisted by Gabriel Landeskog, so less than a third. This year, once David Pastrnak got healthy at the end of January for Boston, and Boston's top line was back together, Patrice Bergeron scored 20 goals after that point. 5 of them were full line goals. And that line plays every single second together. I mean, pretty much, I think there was like 2 games where David Pastrnak played down on the second line. But other than that, they played almost every single second together, and only a quarter of their goals were full line goals. Full line goals aren't common. It's just that when they do happen, and like they do happen when you have 8 or 9 games on a slate, that's why we say to stack. They just don't happen as often when you only have 1 game on a slate. So you don't need the 3-man stack. You don't need the power play stack. You don't need, all 3 guys off an even strength line, or 4 forwards off a power play, or something like that to get ahead. And quite often, in fact, you're not going to get anywhere doing that. So that's one thing that I would say, is that 3-man full stacking isn't something that is as important in showdowns as it might normally be on, a 7-game slate or an 8-game slate or something like that. What are some tips that you think are important for showdown?
Well, I mean, one lineup for showdown is a lot harder than it sounds. Like I'd rather play one lineup in a classic slate than one lineup in a showdown slate, especially because like you make your lineups based on how you think the game flow is going to be. And if you play one lineup and your game flow is wrong, you're going to not be even close to the money. So the big showdown tonight, what 5K to first, is the Colorado Avalanche Blues game. And I think, we always talk about how the Avalanche are really good defensively, this and that. Their goaltending isn't great. So and you want to get in someone like a McKinnon. So something like I would probably do if I think, the Avs win this game handily, like 5-2, something like that, and you don't want a full stack because that's just super expensive, and probably the expected value is probably negative there. So you might want to do something like McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, and then in your captain spot, you have someone like Graves who blocks shots, and you hope you get like the block shot bonus, and then you try to one off the guy on the Blues that you think is going to score, like a cheaper guy like a Hoffman, something like that. Like you have a couple of decisions to make on how you make lineups, right? You either have both goalies, which totally takes up your cap and you have to punt. You put in who you think is going to win, and you have the winning goalie, and then you still have to punt. Or you think, it's going to be semi-high scoring, and you think, the winning goalie may have a good score, but he may not be on the optimal lineup. So you want to get those power play guys in, then you have, punt defensemen. You hope they get the combo meal bonuses. Like the best advice I can give you is, if you're going to do MME, you make groups in the optimizer on how you think game flow is going to be. One lineup, you just have to, it's your best guess, really. That's all, it all really is. And you build according to how you think the game flow is going to be.
Yeah, I think that's the game flow, I think, is probably the most important part of Showdown. It's not something that we talk about a lot in NHL because it's not super important when you have an 8-game slate or a 10-game slate or something like that, because multiple lines will get there, right? Like if you have a 10-game slate, you might have 3 or 4 different full lines that go nuclear on any given night. Like there might be one that is better than the other, but you might have like multiple lines vying for that second most popular stack. So like maybe you look in the $10 and there's, Colorado 1 plus, Boston 2 or something like that. And then you look in the $4 and it's Colorado 1 plus Washington 2 or something like that, right? Like that happens a lot on bigger slates. On smaller slates, there's a narrow avenue for you to win. There's only one game flow to project. And if you get that game flow wrong, you're toast. Like if you think the game flow in St. Louis, Colorado tonight is going to be low scoring, so you stack 2 goalies and a couple defensemen and it's a 6-5 game, there's just no hope of winning. None. So like you have to nail the game flow, and then you have to get the right players inside that game flow, which is like the point that you made about someone like Ryan Graves is the point there. Is like if let's say Colorado gets out to a quick 3-0 lead here tonight, McKinnon has a goal, Landeskog has a goal, maybe Makar has a couple assists, and then they kind of sit on that lead, right? That's where Graves can really rack up his value. He can get, maybe he has an assist and then he racks up the block shots as Colorado sits back or something like that. And then he gains value through the game because of that game flow. And that's where, Graves and captain, even though you have McKinnon and Rantanen on your lineup, that's something that would win. And that's something that's important to think about when you're making your Showdown lineups, is you have to think about how is this game going to go tonight? Like if you were looking at Minnesota Vegas yesterday and you thought this is going to be a goalie duel and you had Cam Talbot in your captain and you had Fleury in the lineup, you cashed. Straight up, you cashed. If you thought it was going to be a 4-3 game and you had neither goalies and you had a bunch of forwards, you were nowhere near cashing. That's just the way it works. So you have to think about the game flow when you're making your lineups. You have to think about, if this team gets out to a lead, who's going to benefit? Like, if Colorado gets out to a 3-0 lead, who benefits after that? Well, it's defensemen that'll be blocking shots because, you'd expect the opposition to shoot more, and it'll be the goalies saving those shots, right? So goalies and defensemen in a blowout can be very viable as a captain. So game flow is probably the most important thing. Think about how you think that game is going to go and then plan that lineup accordingly. If you think it's going to be a 6-5 game, get a bunch of forwards from both lines. Don't include any goalies. If you think it's going to be a 1-0, 2-1 low scoring game with a lot of shots like Minnesota Vegas yesterday, put both goalies and some defensemen in there. Get those saves and get those block shots in your lineups. You're not every game is going to feature 7 or 8 goals. Margin of victory is going to be razor thin. We're talking a block shot or 2 is going to mean the difference between maybe winning like 5,000 and winning like 500. So just really pay attention to game flow, stack accordingly, like that. Pricing is something like you have to pay attention to it, but typically, like if you're looking for shot blocking defensemen and stuff like that, you're probably going to have one punt-ish or 2 in your lineup anyway. So pricing isn't something I'm overly concerned with in Showdown. Are you?
No, and especially in the playoffs, I wouldn't be afraid of using bottom 6 players, especially on like the elite team, like the Avs, like someone like Alex Newhook. He could have it. You want to get him before, if he has a couple big games before his price like skyrockets. Like he's someone who's going to be on the ice. He's a skillful player. Yeah, he might be on the 3rd or 4th line tonight, but he's gonna play. Like he's a good player. So don't be afraid to, put that guy in the utility spot to jam in some more studs, something like that. On the Blues, like a Sammy Blais or something like that. Like just because they had a bad regular season doesn't mean they amp it up and have a good playoffs. We've seen it all the time. Like guys who have mediocre regular seasons have great playoff runs. Like Sam Bennett. Like I know that's kind of a bad example. Like I don't know what the hell they're doing in Calgary right now. Like how he couldn't crack the top 6. But like he comes on into the Panthers, like he's in their top 6, and he had a combo meal, 2 assists. Like he had a huge game yesterday. Like players like that, like you think, oh, Sam Bennett, like he couldn't even crack the Flames top 6. Now he's just like every game he's a multi-point scorer. So like that's not going to happen every game, but like you find someone in the bottom 6, like I don't know, like a Nick Ritchie or a Carl Hagelin, something like that, like names, that don't jump off the page, but they've done it in the playoffs before. So don't be afraid to use bottom 6 players.
Yeah, bottom 6 players. And the point of this being the playoffs, I think, is the final point to make here. And it goes back to your point about shot blocking defensemen and stuff like that. If you get a double overtime game or a triple overtime game, you want goalies and defensemen, right? Because the forwards aren't racking up. They might add a shot or 2 or 3 through overtime, but if no one's scoring, they're not racking up big points. The big points are being racked up by the defensemen and the goalies. So that's another thing to keep in mind for Showdown for playoffs is that, just think of that Tampa Columbus game last year that went like 5 overtimes or something like that. And Korpisalo had like 90 saves or whatever, right? Like you won't get a forward up to 23 shots on goal or something like that, but you will get a goalie, up at around 70 saves if this goes to 3 overtimes. So that's another thing about rostering goalies and defensemen in Showdown. I don't have a whole lot left to say about this. Is there anything you want to add?
No, but like going forward, once these 3-game, 4-game first round slates are over, it's going to be mostly Showdown. So if you're not comfortable playing like the higher dollar stuff, getting that mini max if there is one, learn how to make your groups in Fantasy Cruncher, fool around with that stuff with game flow, and get comfortable if you want to stick around for hockey, because after this first round, it's going to be a lot of Showdown.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. I think there is a mini max, and they also do like a 25-cent 20 max. So like there are ways to sharpen your Fantasy Cruncher skills for Showdown without spending a lot of money. All right, that's